All right. Today we're going to talk about the Bill of Rights. Somebody raise their hand and tell me what the Bill of Rights is. Yeah. It is rights given to the people. These are rights that you have that cannot be taken away from you. Specifically, where do they appear? Where do we see them? See them in court a lot. But these are actually, the Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. Okay, we have 27 amendments total. The Bill of Rights are the first 10, and they were all suggested at the same time. And there were actually 12 of them that were suggested. We'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, the First Amendment. This is the entire First Amendment here, and I'll read it for you. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. First Amendment. So to break this down, there are 5 pieces to that First Amendment. All right? There are 5 pieces. You don't have to type this down. It's okay. This is the First Amendment. You can find this pretty much anywhere. Okay? You can just copy and paste it from anywhere. But I'm going to give you a copy of it at some point. So, but I appreciate the enthusiasm. Do 5 pieces. Okay? So, what are those 5 pieces? That's what we're going to talk about. Amendment 1 is one of the most important amendments in the Bill of Rights. But it was not the original First Amendment. Anybody know what the original First Amendment was? Of course you don't, because you don't know the rest of the amendments, right? That's okay. We're going to get there. The First Amendment was actually an amendment that tied representation to population. And there had to be one representative for every 30,000 people, right? And we did an example of this on the whiteboard back in November. But basically that would mean we would have a couple thousand senators and House members. So they didn't go for that because they didn't want the House to grow to huge sizes. Amendment 1 was actually originally the 3rd amendment to the Constitution. But it is one of the most important because it protects the right of Americans to worship as they please, but it also protects you to have no religion. So if you read that first part of that amendment where it says right to freedom of religion and the free practice thereof, what that includes is you are allowed to go and do whatever you want as far as religion goes, but anybody who is anti-religious has just as much as a right to express their dislike of religious views as you do of expressing your like of religious views. So, for example, funny story, real quick story. When I was in high school, we had a talent show. We had a group of people who wanted to do this play a lot of churches do where there's no words. It's like dramatic music and like it was like this thing. It was a Jesus thing, right? They wanted to do this whole thing. So there was another group of students who were atheists that wanted to do a skit that was pretty much the opposite, denouncing Jesus, right? So our administration approved the Christian group, but did not approve the atheist group. So me, not being a part of either group, naturally thought it was my duty to make sure that everything was fair and equal. And I filed a formal complaint citing violation of the First Amendment rights and of the school, and that they needed to either allow the other group to do that or to disallow both groups from doing that because you can't promote religion in schools. So, not to toot my own horn here, but they canceled both programs. So they didn't allow either group to present. All right. So told you, equality, being able to believe whatever you want to believe has been my core belief for a very long time, and it always will be. Can't do stuff as if it's not equal. You just can't, right? So, part one of the First Amendment is freedom of religion. Exactly what I was just talking about. The kids that believed in Jesus had just as much of a right to perform their skit as the people who did not believe in Jesus or any religious sect. Right? But since religion cannot be promoted in schools, it is permitted, by the way. You are allowed to pray, right? Which, if any of you are religious and you don't pray before my tests, you should probably start because they get a little more difficult now. All right? So there you go. Right? I don't know how much it'll help. Depends on how much placebo effect there is. But we'll see. We'll see. This includes separation of church and state. So this allows us to talk about something that's a little more touchy. Okay? I shouldn't have said the word touchy. That's a little more controversial. It's not funny yet, but it'll be funny in a minute. All right? It's a little more controversial. Same-sex marriage. Right? Same-sex marriage. So my question to you is, why was same-sex marriage illegal in the first place? Sorry, Tyler. Why was it illegal in the first place? Now, you're all racking your brains, but I will not accept any answers that have to do with the Bible or God. Because, according to our First Amendment, the Bible doesn't exist when it comes to laws. So why was it made illegal? There you go. That's the point. Whether you like it or not, in the eyes of our government, religion doesn't exist. Your God doesn't matter in the eyes of the government. Okay? No God matters in the eyes of the government, at least idealistically. Now, obviously, there are a lot of candidates that are elected to office that say, I'm of this religion and I practice every day because it helps them get elected. It makes them seem more likable. It makes them seem like they're a nicer person because they believe in God. Some of them do. Some of them do it specifically to get elected. Okay? They do, right? But none of their decisions should be influenced by their religion. But is that always the case? I think the answer is definitely not, because we have a lot of laws that are based on religion and different religious texts, right? Like interracial marriage was illegal for a long time, all the way up until technically all the way up until like 1992, I think the last interracial marriage law was revoked. It wasn't enforced for a long time, but it still technically was illegal, right? There are a whole bunch of things that stem from religion. So separation of church and state is absolutely crucial. I don't teach you about any specific religion, but if I did, I would have to teach you about all kinds of religions. And I would have to do it from a historical standpoint, and I couldn't teach you what's right and wrong based on religion. Next is freedom of petition. All right, how many of you have filed a petition? How many of you have started a petition or signed a petition like out of school when you were in grade school or elementary school or even like junior high, right? So for those of you that have done that, it means nothing. Okay? Even if you had every signature from every student in the building, absolutely nothing would happen. Okay? Now, we went over this, but you technically have no rights to yourself. You do not get to decide what's best for yourself. You don't get to decide what you do. You get to decide absolutely nothing when it comes to your lives. Is that right or wrong? That's up for you to decide. Okay? But the fact is, if your parents don't make the decision, it doesn't matter. Now, some of you are probably saying, oh, but I'm 18 years old. Awesome. I'm really happy you're 18 years old. A lot of avenues open for you when you turn 18, right? But there's a special piece of paper you have to have signed in the main office that says you are your own adult and you can sign all of your stuff. As soon as that happens, you magically become a person who can make decisions. All right, face right now, no wave at him, because we got disconnected. But yeah, you don't get to decide. So let's talk about something a little darker. So let's say you are dating somebody who is older than you. Say you're dating somebody who's 19 and you're 17. Okay? And you have sexual intercourse. And you, being 17, do not get to decide who you have sex with. 100% not up to you. You do not get to make that choice. Right? Look how awkward Kaylee feels right now. It's fantastic. She's like covering her face. She's like looking away. She's like, please don't talk about sex. This is weird. All right. So if your parents, you as a 17-year-old, wanted to file charges against this 19-year-old person for statutory rape, they 100% can, and that person will probably go to jail. And what you say about it means absolutely nothing because you have no rights to your own body. None. You're not even allowed to get started on birth control or have an abortion until you're 18 years old without your parents' permission. Right? You have pretty much no rights as an individual until you turn 18 years old. And in school, that extends until after you graduate or after you sign this little piece of paper that we have in the office. All right? But just so you know, your parents also have to sign that paper. So if they don't sign it, then it doesn't work. Right? When I was in high school, if you were 18, you could excuse yourself for being tardy. So like when you had excused absences, I would just write, Ross wasn't feeling good yesterday. Sincerely, Ross. And they'd have to excuse it because I had everything signed. But it doesn't work like that anymore. You can't do that. But it used to be pretty cool. All right. So petitions are meant to change things. All right. You can file a petition to do certain things. Freedom of assembly. What does assembly sound like? It reminds me of Thundercats. Anybody ever watched that cartoon? Older cartoon from the 70s. It was like retro cool when I was a kid, but it's probably like so retro now that it's cool again. I probably or will be in the next year or two, right? But do we know what the Thundercats are? Okay, if you do, awesome. If you don't, you're gonna judge me pretty bad here. But they yell, "Thundercats assemble!" Right? And he throws this signal up in the air, and everybody just like appears and teleports there, and it was awesome, Kaylee. You gotta admit, it was pretty cool, right? In today's society, if you're not a nerd, you're not cool. Period. Conversation over. If you didn't know that. So, assemble means to bring people together in a mass. This is your protest. You are 100% allowed to protest, and you can protest anything you want. So, for example, how many of you have ever heard of the Westboro Baptist Church? Westboro Baptist Church, anybody? Jacob, Cameron, you shaking your head? Okay. Westboro Baptist Church is a radicalized Christian group. They would be considered the alt Christians, like they're very different from a traditional Christian standpoint. How are they different? I'm glad you asked. They believe that every death is designed by God, and that since God took that life, we have no reason to mourn them. And we have no reason to celebrate their death because God decided, and we are not God, so we don't get to mourn people. So they protest funerals, and not just any funerals, they protest military funerals in particular, are their specialty. Their other specialty are pediatric funerals, so funerals of children. So one of their most famous protests were the funerals of the Sandy Hook children, who died in that school shooting in Sandy Hook, they sent thousands of people up to protest the funerals because they said you shouldn't have a funeral because those kids died because God wanted them to, and that's it. I'm not kidding. You can look this up. 100% fact. Check that out. One of my very favorite things, all right, and I love this, but the Westboro Baptist Church, where they are based, their home church, the equal rights group, so the LGBTQ group, bought a house across the street from their main church and painted it as a rainbow. And there's absolutely nothing the church can do about it. All right? I don't care how you feel about the situation. That is like the ultimate revenge. Like, that's awesome. That's such a good idea. If you want to get somebody back, that's the way to do it. But yeah, so are they allowed to assemble and protest those children's funerals? Absolutely. Are they allowed to protest military funerals? Absolutely. Right? Now, we won't dive into this whole situation because it's a lot more complicated than people understand because of player unions and different things. But this part, the First Amendment, your freedom of speech and your freedom of assembly, is what is protecting professional players when they take a knee during the national anthem. Okay? There is absolutely nothing the owners can do. There's absolutely nothing that the coaches can do, because if you sit them for expressing their First Amendment right, you're technically violating a contract and you're violating the law, and that's illegal. You can't do that, right? So everybody just says, oh, just fire them. It doesn't work like that. You can't just fire players. There's contracts, there's money, there's guaranteed money, there's players unions, there's all kinds of stuff going on. So you can't just fire players. You can cut them in certain scenarios and you can do certain things, but if you cut a player, you still have to pay them their entire contract, right? So it's really, really complicated, but this is part of what protects them from doing those things. Freedom of speech. Can you say whatever you want? Kind of. Kind of. All right. You and I both have modified First Amendment rights when we're in school, right? If you say something that's hate-like in school, I'm going to send you to the office and judge you for the rest of your life, right? Like if you say something racist, I will send you to the office and then I'll judge you, right? Can you say racist things in life? Sure, but a school is different. You agreed to come to the school and you agreed to abide by our rules, and our rules are you can't be racist. And don't be surprised if our handbook changes a little bit in the next couple weeks, by the way, when it comes to racial issues. All right? Going to be pretty cool, actually, because it's going to mimic our current Ohio laws in our handbook. So pretty exciting stuff. Just stay tuned for that. But you can't say anything that you want all the time. If you're in your own house, you can pretty much say whatever you want, right? The only things that are a little prohibited is if you make direct threats. So if Ben and I are in a disagreement and I am holding a gun and I say, Ben, I'm going to kill you, and I have a gun in my hand, can I say that? Yes, but I need to expect repercussion. I can't just say that with a gun in my hand and not expect Ben to say, well, I don't want to die, so I'm going to do something, right? So technically, that is called battery. Does anybody know the difference between assault and battery?
Assault is like a threat.
Assault is actually doing the thing. Battery is the threat of assault. And then there's menacing. You know what menacing is? Menacing is a step before battery. So it goes menacing, where you're like maybe stepping up on somebody, leaning over top, showing dominant body language. Battery is weapon, words. Assault is physical. Okay? So it goes in 3 steps. What's another thing you can't do when it comes to freedom of speech? Anybody know? The classic example, you can't yell fire at a movie theater, right? You can't induce panic. You can't encourage violence. So if there's a public speaker who says, hey, everybody in this room, if you agree with me, go kill old people, right? You can't do that. That's inciting panic. You can't induce violence. If there's no fire, you can't yell fire because that induces panic. So there are some limitations with your freedom of speech. Freedom of press is the last and fifth pillar of the First Amendment. Can the press write whatever they want? Again, kind of. Most of the time, yes, they can write whatever they want, as we found out when we watched All the President's Men, right? The press was able to uncover an entire government conspiracy from the bottom up and showed that it went from these low-level diplomats all the way up to the White House, the Attorney General, all kinds of people at CREEP, which for those of you that didn't know is the Committee to Re-elect President. Okay? So, freedom of press, they can say whatever they want. However, they can't lie. They're not allowed to lie. Now, why can't they lie? Yeah, because it could hurt somebody's character. How many of you have ever heard of slander? All right. There's slander and there is libel. Does anybody know the difference? Slander is when you say something specifically just to hurt someone's reputation. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, what if you say something you think is true, but it ends up not being true? You're protected by the law. You can do that if you have some evidence. But if you specifically say something that is a 100% lie on purpose, just to hurt someone's reputation, that is slander. If you do the same thing, but you write it down in like a letter or like an article in a newspaper, the word changes. It's not slander anymore. It's called libel, L-I-B-E-L. Why does it change words? I don't know. English is by far the most complicated language in the world. And yet, most English speakers don't speak another language. But every other language is easier to learn than English. Explain that to me. And I can't speak another language. So I'm in this argument. Like I'm part of what I'm saying. So, yeah. How many of you know that in Europe, in European culture, it's very, very common for people to have to pay to use bathrooms? Pay a fee to be able to use their bathroom. Anywhere from like a €0.25 to €1 full, all the way up to €5. And sometimes during certain events where people are partaking in certain activities, they can charge as much as they want. Right? It's documented that they've charged as much as €500 just to use the bathroom. And pay to use the bathroom. Yes. Yeah. Yep. It is an actual fee to use the bathroom. Actually, I had a friend, he went on his honeymoon to Europe and had no idea. And they budgeted the entire thing out. And basically, when they got there, they didn't have enough money because they didn't account for having to go to the bathroom while they were out doing things. What'd you find? Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, euros, there are only two currencies that are worth more than the US dollar, the British pound and the euro. So the British pound is worth a lot more. Like one US dollar will get you about 61 British pound cents. And one US dollar gets you about 77 euro cents. Right? So there you go. Sorry. Like bathrooms? No, money. Actually, the easiest system, in my opinion, for money is Japan. Japan doesn't have any coins. It's all dollars. So instead of making something $1, they just made it $100. Right? But $100 is only worth $1. Right? So 100 is not a lot of money to them. Right? Like instead of getting paid $10 an hour, they get paid $1,000 an hour. So it's all inflated. Sounds like a lot, but it's actually exactly the same. There's no difference. Right. So instead of like, right, we pay $1.47 for something, they just pay $147. They just cut out all the coins. So they just increased their inflation by 100, and then it got rid of all their coins, and they stopped producing them. Yeah. So it's nothing for a pizza to cost you like $2,100. But that's actually how much? $21 when you convert it, right? So how many of you know what prior restraint is? Prior restraint and why it's on there. Okay, prior restraint is the only example of censorship of the government. So prior restraint basically says, hey, media, you can't release government secrets. You can't just say whatever you want. Because if you're releasing military secrets to the world and compromising public safety, then you're going to get punished. So really, they can publish anything they want as long as it doesn't incite or induce panic or violence, as long as it's not libelistic or slanderous, and if it doesn't reveal government or military secrets. Okay? So hopefully this video still works.
Things our new Constitution didn't take care of. So the first Congress came up with 10 changes, or amendments, these became known as the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment is important because Congress actually told itself what it could not do. If we're using today's language, the First Amendment would say, you can't pass laws that keep people from practicing their religion. You can't pass laws that keep people from speaking their minds or publishing their ideas. And you can't pass laws that stop folks from getting together peacefully to express their views to their government. The First Amendment is a biggie. And that's another act of Congress.
All right, the reason I played that video is because it's so pathetically awful, but it does get the point across. It puts things concisely in their exact categories. Jacob, you had a question? Then that would be fine. So let's say you yell fire in a movie theater, but there's actually a fire in a movie theater. I took this video out. I shouldn't have taken it out, but it was boring. There's basically a video I have of a popcorn machine in a movie theater on fire, and it's like burning, and somebody's yelling fire in a movie theater. And like, if you know the First Amendment, it's just really funny because that's the most classic example of your freedom of speech being limited. But if there is actually something to panic about, then you're good. You can just say it. All right. That's all we're going to get to today. See ya.